Today, we're playing with marbles. This is, well, you all know what it is, and the essay is called Playing with Marbles. You take the heel of your shoe and drill a hole in the fresh-thawed, water-infested earth. You and your buddies step off 3 or 4 paces and let the games begin. I've always been partial to the sound and feel of marbles rattling around in my pocket. I suspect accumulating marbles was perhaps one of the first really materialistic urges that I experienced as a wee lad. From a very early age, it was important to me to own more marbles than either of my brothers, and more than any of my friends. I really did like the rattling and the rolling. I wouldn't cheat to accumulate marbles, and I promise I never stole any. Unless you count the few my younger brother may have been careless enough to leave untended. But folks, the temptations were always there, and I have to admit, there were some moments when I stretched the rules to acquire more marbles. Glass eyes, agates, crocus, cat eyes, glassers, twirlers, and clay drops or taws. I coveted them all. I stored them in mittens and filled a sock or two in a good season. I sometimes hid them in places so secret I'd forget where they were. I often slept with my stash under my pillow, only because I always doubted my brother's values, more than I ever questioned my own. We'd play for onesies or twosies, we'd play off the wall or drop the bomb, or a dozen other games taught to us by older classmates or simply created by us as we went along. My personal favorite was off the wall, with 2 or 10 guys deftly tossing marbles toward an immovable object. It was pretty easy to do. Rule was that the marble had to hit the ground once and roll towards the wall without touching it. If your marble touched the wall, you were out of the game and you lost your marbles. Sorry. Simplest, the closest marble to the wall, always without touching the wall, took the whole line. Simple and brutal jungle-like warfare. It was a perfect game for kids of any age. Sometimes we'd have to go find a girl we trusted enough to settle a tie. A fellow with a gentle toss could clean up dozens of marbles in just a few games of off the wall. The secret of success was to deliver a high, arching toss and have a pretty good eye. I got pretty good at it. One spring I recall cutting a hole in the top of a Quaker Oats box and challenging guys to drop marbles through that hole. Rule was to hold the marble higher than your belt. I made a bunch of marbles off that little gig. I'd tell them they could keep all the marbles in the box if their marble went through. I'd keep their marbles if they missed. Sounded so easy, and I'd rattle that box wickedly, making them think there was 100 marbles in there, all ripe for the taking. In fact, I never had more than a dozen marbles in that box. And it was always about spring. Playing marbles as a boy was a genuine and official rite of spring. We'd drill the holes for games on the south side of school and be playing weeks before the snow was gone from the north side. As a married man and father, the scattered remains of my marble collection, not already consumed by my kids, gravitated to a glass jar that we always stored in the sill of our dining room window. The way the sun played through those marvelous glass morsels never failed to warm my heart. Any time in the past decade or 3, whenever I'd happen to see a stray marble, I'd pick it up, save them, if you will, and they'd rattle around in my pocket till I passed that jar and I'd drop them in. It had never been unusual for me to turn a marble or 2 when I'm working outside. I'd find them in a garden over where the old sandbox used to be, or when I was digging holes. Another prime spot was at the schoolyard, which was not far from my home. I guess I should have missed that jar one day when it disappeared. A year ago, While visiting our son and his new wife in their new home, I was startled to see that jar of marbles in their south-facing window. There were several immediate and surly comments about grand theft marbles, but secretly I was delighted to discover that he wanted that piece of my home, of my life, in his home. I almost told him so, but I resisted. So last fall, on a weekend trip to the Strawberry Bank Restoration in New Hampshire, Jane and I encountered a huge and colorful marble display in the museum store. I was shocked by the prices, but had to have at least enough to fill one pocket. Jane rolled her eyes, but paid the bill, muttering something about boys who never quite seemed to grow up. I told her we would put those museum quality marbles in our kids' stockings at Christmas, and she agreed, and we did. Visiting Miles last month, we were offered back that original jar of marbles. He took it right off that window and had it right in his hand, ready for the trip back to Maine. He had assumed, and I'm betting it was with some coaching from his very savvy wife, that the gift of the stocking marbles at Christmas was a hint that I really wanted him to return my original stash. But they missed the point, folks. I love the idea that he has claimed those marbles, and he also treasures the way the sun floods through that jar. I love that he sees them as a piece of my heritage and now of his. I'll just start a new jar for my window. Thanks for listening.